country and the world. And so my hope today in presenting to you is twofold. First, I want to get you really excited about being here. You probably already are, but I want to help you understand why it's so cool that you're here, and I want to get you really excited to like sneak out of the hotel between sessions to go exploring. And I'm going to try and give you some tips on how to do that too. But the other part is I want to get you excited about historic preservation, because a lot of you probably think about, like old ladies with white tennis shoes when you think about historic preservation, but we're so much more than that. New Orleans is the mecca of historic preservation and historic architecture, but every town represented here, every city, you all have historic resources and assets, and they're vitally important to where you live, where you work, and where you play. And so I hope to tell you all about that today. I'm going to start my timer here so I don't talk to you forever. Okay. Again, welcome. It's pronounced New Orleans, just so you all know. Don't say New Orleans, don't say NOLA. Just trying to help you guys, not out yourselves as tourists. But if you do, that's okay. We have 19 million of you come visit every year. And we love you for that, and we're grateful for that. New Orleans is a tremendously unique place. The reason you are here is because of our incredible history and the blending of cultures that happened to create the modern day city that you know today, that you're here in, that you hopefully will go explore. New Orleans is singularly unique in terms of the amount of architecture we still have standing. That's historic. The cuisine we have, the music we have. I'm gonna help you guys understand the context of why you're here, and hopefully that'll get you a little bit more excited about being here. So New Orleans was founded in 1718 by the French, right? There were already lots of people here. They were the Homa people, Chitimacha, Choctaw, Biloxi, other native tribes. This was an incredibly important site because of our location on the Gulf of Mexico. For those of you who flew in and did a circle of the Gulf, you might have been shocked to see like you were over the ocean and then literally like 5 minutes later you were landing at the airport. We're really close to the ocean, we can't see it, but we are. So we're close to the Gulf of Mexico and we're at the mouth of the Mississippi River. So we have always been an incredibly important trading site, meeting site. Native peoples would come here for trading purposes, economy, and unfortunately for everyone, they were found out this wonderful location was taken by the French in 1718, claimed for France, and developed despite all advice otherwise. Because what a terrible place to develop a city. I mean, yes, we had the Gulf and the Mississippi, but it was all swamps and terrible weather. It was hot as heck. There's mosquitoes everywhere, which meant disease. There's hurricanes. There was not a lot going for New Orleans other than the waterways. But the French persevered. They built the city here, and the original city is the French Quarter. So that is the original city of New Orleans, that 1 square mile block of buildings. The French had control, it was a French colony, until the Spanish took over in the 1760s. And the Spanish held rule of New Orleans for about 40 years. The French briefly got it back right before 1803, which was Louisiana Purchase, correct. Of course, it wasn't all French people and Spanish people, it was the people they brought with them, namely the enslaved people, that built the infrastructure of this city. There cannot be enough said about the influence that came from the people who were brought from Africa, many of them through the Caribbean. They are the heart and soul of this city, and why there is so much creativity and perseverance. And this is a picture of a plantation that I hope some of you are able to make it out to. It's called Whitney Plantation. It's a truly jarring experience to be out there. It's a site that has been dedicated to telling the story of the enslaved people of this region and what their lives were truly like. It is a bus ride, so you need to plan for a few hours, but if you can make it out there, it's worth it. But anyway, so we have this mix now of people of African descent, Spanish, French, native peoples, Then we throw in free people of color. So in Saint Domingue, which is now today known as Haiti, there was this thing called a revolution in the 1790s. And free people of color came by the thousands to New Orleans and settled here. So in pre-Civil War United States, New Orleans had a thriving community of thousands and thousands of free people of color. That was not the case anywhere else in the South, certainly, and in most of the United States as well. Not only was it free people of color who came from Haiti, but slaves were actually able to work on their day off, make money, save money, and they could buy their freedom. So there was also free people who had started as slaves and then could join this community of free people of color. New Orleans, real estate especially, is incredible when you start looking at how some of these downtown older neighborhoods were developed. Many of them were developed by free women of color, because women in Louisiana could own property. Stuff like that wasn't happening anywhere else in the country for many, many, many years after. So this was truly a unique thing that was happening in New Orleans. Then you have the influence of the Anglo-Saxons. Of course, Louisiana purchased 1803, but Americans were coming down well before that, buying real estate, doing business. This place was an economic powerhouse for all of the 19th century. We were the third largest city in the country. Our port was hugely important. It still is to this day. We're certainly not that large at this point. But the amount of commerce that was happening here, the mix of people from all over the world, this was a cosmopolitan place of business. And, and people who from the Northeast, the kind of white Anglo-Saxon population, they wanted a piece of it, and they started developing property all over the city. You have the Acadians, French Canadian settlers who were moved down to rural Louisiana. You know them today as Cajuns. They had their own language, way of life, culture, food, music. That blended into this very big mixing pot. Then you have post-colonial European settlers. We have a huge immigration of Italians, mostly from Sicily. We have Irish, we have German. And then you have 20th century immigration as well. After the fall of Saigon, a huge Vietnamese population settled in New Orleans, mostly brokered by the Catholic Church. New Orleans, being French and Spanish, is a hugely Catholic city. If you haven't figured that out yet, you'll see that all over the place now that your eyes are open to it. But we have a huge Vietnamese population. They are still here and thriving today, mostly in New Orleans East and on the West Bank of New Orleans. And then post-Katrina, we owe so much of our rebuilding to the Latino community that moved here. We have an enormous Honduran population, other Central American countries, and we owe a debt of gratitude to them, and their communities continue to grow and thrive here. This has all blended together over 300 plus years to create the incredible city that we have today. It is vibrant, it's colorful, it's delicious, it sounds great. You guys are gonna have a great time here. The food here is not something you'll find everywhere else. You will find people trying to emulate it all over the country, but the great thing about New Orleans is even like a crappy tourist place in the French Quarter, their food's gonna be great. So I hope you eat your hearts out while you're here. Get jambalaya, gumbo, etouffee, po' boys, beignets. Just go wild. You can, I know it's the new year, you can lose the weight after this trip, okay? You start your resolutions later, just go ahead and let yourself go nuts while you're here, please, for your own sake. The music is so good here, though. If you didn't know, this is where jazz was born. America's indigenous art form was born here in New Orleans. It comes from the ancestral beats of the slaves who would meet on Sundays in Congo Square, right outside of the French Quarter in Armstrong Park, to enjoy themselves, play drums, dance. All of that migrated through the years, evolved into people sitting on their stoops on their front porch, playing music, playing horns. And jazz was born here in New Orleans. And then, moved to Chicago, moved to the Northeast, and grew, but we still have it today. New Orleans is one of the only cities today where you can be a working, thriving musician and make a living for yourself. That's pretty great. You can go any time of day, y'all, to Frenchman Street in the Barony, that's right outside the quarter, and find a club with live jazz music. So I hope you're able to do that at some point during your visit. We have incredible culture in terms of our celebrations. We celebrate life here. I'm sure you guys have heard of a little thing called Mardi Gras. This is one of the Mardi Gras crews. Crews are groups that celebrate and do parades, and you have to be a member to participate, but the parades are for everybody. If you've never been during Mardi Gras, you should make it back during, sometime in your life. It's called the biggest free party in the world, and literally it's 2 weeks of parade after parade after parade after party after party after party, just celebrating life and getting all of our yayas out before Lent. Again, the Catholic is real, it's everywhere. That's the whole purpose. This is the Zulu crew, for those of you who aren't aware of them, but they are one of the oldest and most important social aid and pleasure clubs here in New Orleans. Okay, so here are all the things you already know about New Orleans. You probably knew them before you came here. You knew about Mardi Gras, jazz, second lines, dancing in the street. You know we have historic buildings and neighborhoods. You know about the quarter, gumbo, and all the good food. Yeah, it's the best food in the United States. Just go hog wild. We have tropical courtyards in the French Quarter, Bourbon Street, love it or hate it. You probably gotta see it. Cocktails for those of you who are 21 and up. The Saints, God bless them. People are nuts about them despite their record. Thank God. The Black Mexican Indians, also known as Mardi Gras Indians, and kind of this incredible, rich culture of African American social aid and pleasure clubs through the years, and thriving despite all challenges in the city. Brass bands and live music, just kind of this attitude of having fun and enjoying life while we have it. Coffee, did y'all know that this is the biggest port for coffee in the United States? We are a coffee town, we're super serious about it. We're not relaxing, we are just getting buzzed. And really, this is the most European city in the United States in terms of our attitude, in terms of, living on the streets, or maybe it's also the most Caribbean city, because stuff's slow around here, y'all. You really gotta be patient, in good and bad ways. But there's so much more to our city that I want you guys to, if you're interested, look into. Again, the horrors of slavery. We were the biggest slave market in the United States. Over 100,000 people bought and sold in our slave markets in New Orleans. When you think about how horrific that legacy is, it's jarring. But it's also important to remember that the people who were here, they built all of this city and so that's important to acknowledge and remember. Again, the incredible achievements of free people of color in the early 1800s. Yeah, they were free, but there was still horrific racism and all these sorts of challenges that they faced, and they thrived despite all of that. And that's incredible to really learn about and dig into. The fight to overcome the influence of the Confederacy, post-Civil War, and the lost cause mentality. This is still the South. We might be different, we might be European, but this is still very much the South. And the schools having to integrate in the 1950s was national news because of the violence and the hatred surrounding it. And this beautiful little girl is a woman named Leona Tate, who integrated a McDonough school in the lower 9th Ward. And she's an incredible story. You should look her up. Maybe you could go visit the Tate Etienne Prevost Center. It's called the TEP Center. She bought this school that she integrated and has turned it into a civil rights site. I mean, that's pretty incredible. So check that out if you have a little bit of time. Also, did you know that early rock and roll started here in New Orleans? A lot of people don't know that. But Fats Domino's from here, and the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, all those people came here in the early days of R&B, and they loved the sound. And that is what became modern day rock and roll. So we're not just great for jazz, we're great for all sorts of music. Of course, you remember Hurricane Katrina. You know of New Orleans because of Katrina, where so much of the city flooded, thousands of people died. A horrific event that, for those of you who were, can remember 2005, I bet a lot of you can't, you were too young. But for those of you who can, you can imagine, remember watching the news and just thinking, how is this the United States? How is this happening that thousands of people are dying in this city underwater? It was something that, all New Orleanians still remember with great sadness, and there is no happy thing to say about it. But what I will say is that this incident reminded every New Orleanian about what it means to love this place, what it means to be resilient and be resolved and be stubborn and come back no matter what, because times are here, that your culture and your history is here, and that's what people did. And interestingly, you know, while the rest of the world crashed during the financial crisis of 2008, things were blowing and going here in New Orleans. We had federal funding, we had a brain gain of people from around the country and world who wanted to come help and rebuild. And the city is, you know, strong today because of the efforts of all of the people who were here and the people who came. And that's a pretty beautiful thing to witness. So all of that is kind of to help you understand why this place is totally unique, and you should be super excited to be here. We have thrived for 300 years despite all odds, despite hurricanes and intense heat and some rainstorms that flood everything and termites and all this other great stuff. Oh, remember COVID? We were the early hotspot. Yeah, that was really fun. Just seems to be one thing after another, but we're still here, we're still thriving, and we're so glad that you're here to experience our city with us today. This is an idea for you guys to understand how historic the city is. These are the designated districts of the city of New Orleans. So they're either light teal or dark teal, but those are the National Register historic districts as well as the locally designated districts, which are overseen with by City Hall, basically rules governing what you can and cannot do with your property. So you can see that a lot of the city of New Orleans is designated as historic, and this doesn't even encompass all the things that aren't historic. There are plenty of historic areas here that have not been officially designated. So there's a lot here. We've got an incredible amount of building stock that is historic, and it's really special, and I want to tell you about it because my hope is that you get out to neighborhoods and walk the streets, because that's really where the heart and soul of this city is in our neighborhoods where people live. And one thing you'll notice when you're out and about in the streets is that there are businesses everywhere. Modern zoning did away with that in a lot of the United States, but here in New Orleans, you can still be on a street with houses and you'll see a sandwich shop, or you'll see a little grocery store, or you'll see a bar. That's really great. You know, they should bring that back everywhere because we love it. This is a Creole cottage. This is one of the earliest types of vernacular architecture that you can find here in New Orleans. These are some of the oldest houses in the city. So when you see these, you can know that that's old. You'll see these in the French Quarter, again, the original city, and neighborhoods that developed after the French Quarter, like the Tremé, the Marigny, and the Bywater. This is a cruciform structure, so it's 2 rooms deep in the front, 2 identically sized rooms behind it. It's just a square, split into 4. And then in the back, because this looks pretty modest, right? And it's up against 2 other houses, so there's, you know, it's on the street. It's really, you know, you might think that's kind of tight. Well, in the back, there's a secret, and that there's a courtyard. So this is how people live. They'd have their house up on the street, but then in the back, they would raise livestock. They'd plant things. Or, you know, in modern times, they'd have a tropical oasis to enjoy. That's the back of the house. You can see the 2 archways, and on either side are the loggia, which are like giant outdoor cabinets where people would store food and olive oil and that sort of thing. This little house here is just an extra add-on because why not? Creole townhouses in the French Quarter. These are just old, you know, townhouses that a lot of times the family would live upstairs and downstairs would be their commerce, their little shop or whatever. Today they're all residences, and you can see this sort of architecture. This is familiar if you've been around the Caribbean, because you can see the Spanish influence. This is an entresol building, again, Spanish influence. That middle floor really only has like 8-foot ceilings, because the idea was downstairs is the shop, the middle floor is like the storage area for the goods of the shop, and then the family would live on the 3rd floor. So this is an entresol building. You can see these in the French Quarter as well. This is called a center hall cottage. This is later. This is the American influence coming in. You go through the center of the home. There's a big hallway, and then on either side you have a living room or a parlor, a dining room or a parlor, and you go back and then you have living quarters, kitchen, that sort of thing. This is absolutely a gracious, aka wealthy type of house that you're going to find in more of the uptown neighborhoods. These are the working man's houses. These are shotguns. Maybe you've heard of these. The idea behind a shotgun is they're 1 room deep the whole way down. So you can fire a shotgun through the front door, and it's going to go through every room in the house and then enter out the back without hitting a wall. All the doors are aligned. it's just one room, one room, one room, one room. Listen, that's not the best for modern day living, because who wants to walk through your bedroom to get to the kitchen? Not a lot of people. So these houses have been modified in modern day to include side hallways, but the idea behind them, and a Creole cottage too, is not to waste any square footage with hallways. You know, you want to maximize the square footage for living quarters. And that's what shotguns do. On the left is a single shotgun, so you can see that it's called 2-bay, 2 openings, a door and a window. Here on the right is a double shotgun, and some of these have been converted into singles, but traditionally these are like a duplex. You call them a duplex in other cities. And generational living is a huge deal here in New Orleans still to this day, where, you know, maybe the grandma lives on one side and the younger family lives on the other side. And that has always been the case. And so that continues to this day. There are shotguns around the country, in other places definitely, but you will not find them en masse like you will in New Orleans. And note the different details, by the way. So the building type is shotgun, but the style can be anything you want. You can find Greek revival details, you can find Italianate details, you can find arts and crafts details, and so it's really fun to kind of interpret when a house might have been built, or it might have been built a lot longer than the family saved up enough money to put some fancy details on the front. And you can see, you know, with the style that came later. You stick a second floor on it, it's called the Camelback. So that is a double shotgun with Camelback. It's got a side gallery here. A lot of these have an outdoor side porch called gallery. And it's 4-bay. Can you tell why? Because there's 4 openings on the front, 2 doors, 2 windows. I neglected to mention, and this picture doesn't really show it, but a lot of these doors have what's called a transom above it. Does anybody know what a transom is? Exactly. It's a small window right above the door. And the idea was you flip all of them open. They'd be above every single doorway. It's a shotgun, it's straight across, so they're all aligned. And you could keep your front door locked and secure, but the air is gonna flow through your house and keep things cool with all the transoms open. This is a corner store. These are prolific throughout the city. They might be single story, they might be double story. The one on the left is in the Treme. The one on the right is still an active grocery store in the French Quarter. Maybe you'll find it. It's called Matasas. This is the American influence again. This could be Philadelphia, it could be anywhere. This is New Orleans. This is called Julia Row. It's also known as the 13 Sisters, so federal style brick townhouses on Julia Street. Really beautiful. The PRC actually helped catalyze their restoration in the 1970s. It was known as Skid Row back then. They had completely fallen apart. And the PRC bought one, fixed it up, and that inspired people to buy the others. And today they look like this. Here's some other beautiful types of architecture you can see around town. I hope that you're able to take a trip on the St. Charles Avenue streetcar, because it is really a treat. You can just relax, sit back, and enjoy the architecture up and down the avenue. Gorgeous homes of all styles and types, but they're just visually a feast. So that's a little bit of a primer. Since y'all are architecture students, I figured you might like that a little bit. But I hope you get out and explore and see some of this for yourself. We have kind of an embarrassment of riches here, and this kind of created this attitude of like, well, what does it matter? You know, like I want to develop a 5,000 square foot house, and there's this tiny shotgun here. What's the big deal if I just knock it down and you know, build what I want to build? Well, you do that enough times and you completely change the streetscape. You change the flavor of a neighborhood. You erase the history essentially, and that's been happening in some of our neighborhoods, especially the more valuable ones in terms of property values. Just some good examples of like, well, what does it matter? Well, you know, this is a Danielle Burnham train station that was demolished, and look at it today, great. Here's another one. Temple Sinai was demolished for a parking lot. Great. It's like you never hear anybody say, man, I really wish I would have demolished that. It's always the opposite. I really wish we would have saved X. It's a good lesson to remember. You shouldn't demolish them, just fix them. That's what the PRC did. It's a whole block called General Taylor Street in uptown New Orleans. The whole block was falling down, so the PRC bought the block, fix them up one at a time, started in the middle and worked their way out. And today it is a thriving neighborhood. It actually works a little too well. They're very expensive. Here's another one, before and after. This is a shotgun and Holy Cross that the PRC acquired and fixed up. We have renovated and fixed almost 1,000 buildings across the city, pre and post Katrina. Holy Cross is in the lower 9th Ward. It's a historic neighborhood, and the sad part of that for us was that we started work pre-Katrina, and then it flooded, and then we had to do it all over again. But we did. We did over 60 houses in Holy Cross. This is one of my favorite ones. This is on North Claiborne Avenue in the Treme. We bought this property. It was on the city's demolition list. It was probably weeks away from being demolished. We purchased it, and after we purchased it, we found out that it was the last remaining building of any of the 3 first African-American colleges or universities in the state of Louisiana. So this was the last remaining building of Straight University, which later went on to become Dillard University, which is an HBCU here in New Orleans. And we were able to save it. It took us 10 years to raise the money. We spent over $1 million. That's what it turned into. We're really proud of that. It's worth the effort. It's worth the effort to save these buildings from destruction. We were founded 50 years ago by people who wanted to save their city. You remember the Temple Sinai a few minutes ago? That was happening all over the city. Speculative demolition. Buildings being torn down with the idea that lots of money's coming into the city, someone's gonna want this lot, they're gonna wanna build, let's just get rid of the building now so that we have the space when the time comes. And then the time never came. We had, lots across downtown where buildings just like those you'd find in the French Quarter once stood. And people got really mad across the city in the 70s. This was a response in many cities. So if you all have a historic preservation organization in your city, it probably was founded around the time of urban renewal. Thanks, Moses. But PRC was founded to help concerned citizens get together and stop unwanted demolitions and save buildings they cared about. And we're still doing that 50 years later. Our mission is to preserve the historic architecture, neighborhoods, and cultural identity through empowerment, collaboration, and service to our community. We rewrote our mission statement in 2018, and it's important to just note the shift of, when preservation was founded as a field in the 60s and 70s, the idea was there's lots of important architects and important buildings, and we must landmark them and save them all. And what happened was that the truly important buildings to communities, which maybe weren't designed by fancy architects or architecturally significant as others, with people, that were built by people with money, were overlooked. And so to this day, now we have this crisis where only 2% of the buildings that are listed on the National Register of Historic Places were built by people of color or are used by people of color. They're sites of significance. It should be so much bigger than that. 2% is a shame. And so this shift is marking the intention to change that, to say, we are not telling you what's important and that you should save it. We are coming to you as a community and saying, what buildings do you value most? Where is the church that you grew up going to, the school you went to? What is the building that made your life special? What do you care about saving? How can we empower you with the tools you need to save them? That is a shift that has happened in our field, and we're proud to be kind of on the fore of doing that. Why should you care about historic preservation? Because I bet a bunch of you don't, and that's okay. Architecture school does not prepare you to care about historic preservation necessarily. I think that needs to be shifted because, as I understand it, a lot of you are going to be working on existing buildings. They might not be historic, but you're going to be working on renovations in your careers. And so it's important for you all to understand what's historic, what's not historic, what's worth saving, what's not worth saving. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. But just kind of generally, why is historic preservation important? Well, it reminds us as a society who we are, where we've been, how far we've come. It's good, the bad, and the ugly. It's really important to acknowledge the uncomfortable past as well as the triumphs. If the building isn't there anymore, put a plaque up. The greenest building is the one that's already built. And I'm sure you all have already heard this a million times, but I just kind of want to reiterate it. New construction accounts for approximately 1/3 of all landfill waste. So by recycling a building, think about it, if you're adamant about recycling a can or a water bottle, like, well, a house is like that times a million. So it's the ultimate form of recycling, and it's really important to think of it in that way. And also these buildings, especially pre-air conditioning buildings, they were built to respond to the environment and climate in ways that we don't do anymore, and they're really energy efficient. Even historic windows, I promise, look into it. Also, these materials, you can't replicate this stuff, y'all. These materials were old growth woods, and they cannot be grown anymore. The pine that you buy today in a store when you are building a house or fixing up a house is going to deteriorate in 5 to 10 years, versus in Louisiana, we have old growth cypress that literally came from underwater in a swamp and can withstand probably nuclear war. So when these homes are demolished and these materials are thrown into a landfill, there's no getting that back. And what a shame, because they would have lasted another 100 years, another 200 years. Like I mentioned before, we have a shamefully low number of sites of significance that represent communities of color. And when we really intentionally practice historic preservation and restore sites or put plaques up on sites, or tell stories of sites, we are able to really highlight stories that have been overlooked, histories that have been overlooked, stories and people. And it's really important to celebrate that and to bring that to the fore as much as possible. And we're proud to do that in the work at the PRC. One of the stories that we were proud to really shed light onto recently was a neighborhood called Pontchartrain Park, which was the first neighborhood that Black people in New Orleans could buy a home in a suburban style setting. And it was developed in the 1940s and 50s and has really incubated excellence for the past 70 years. Famous actors, musicians, politicians, when you look at the list of people who come from this neighborhood, it's really astounding. And it's because they had what they call the Black Mayberry. It was a neighborhood built around a golf course. So there was green space, there was fresh air, there was space for families to grow and thrive. And the Neighborhood Association of Pontchartrain Park came to us in 2020 and asked for our help to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places as a historic district. They had tried twice before and failed. Why had they failed? Because in Hurricane Katrina, a ton of the neighborhood was literally wiped off the map. 8 to 9 feet of water filled Pontchartrain Park and then sat there for days. And so many of the homes, if they hadn't already fallen down, had to be gutted or completely demolished when the water receded because they were ruined. So the Park Service said, well, there's not enough historic integrity of the structures left in the park to qualify to be nominated. What we helped the Park Service understand and agree to was that the resilience of this community to come back and rebuild despite losing everything was part of the cultural and historic significance of this neighborhood. And luckily they agreed. And so we had Pontchartrain Park listed as a National Register Historic District in 2021, and we're very proud of that. Why did the neighborhood care so much about being on the National Register? Well, for a lot of neighborhoods, it's because you can then qualify for historic tax credit incentives, which are programs that developers use to get money back for renovating buildings instead of building new. Huge dollars can be had. But this neighborhood doesn't really have much commercial at all. It's mostly homes, maybe a few churches too. It was about pride. They knew that they were nationally significant for how special their neighborhood was, and they wanted the world to know, and we were very excited to help them do that. Historic buildings remind us how to adapt. I explained the transoms and you can see transoms really well in this photo on the pink house above the doorways. These buildings hold clues as to how people survived before air conditioning and other modern amenities. And bless their hearts, I can't even imagine. It must have been really hard. But a lot of these houses are already elevated because there was flooding back then too. And so the downstairs units would be used for storage, or you wouldn't put your nice furniture or clothing, you'd live upstairs. So these buildings remind us in a modern time when we've forgotten a lot of this, that the people who came before, they knew a lot about how to adapt and survive in really difficult climates and living conditions. There is a direct correlation of your physical and mental health depending on your surroundings. And there's so much about this, and I'm not going to get into it, but it's really intuitive, really. Like, if you're in a place where you feel unsafe, that you feel a certain way, you physically react to that, versus if you are in a place that looks nice, feels welcoming, maybe has trees, has places that are well taken care of, that impacts you. And when you think about the environment in which children grow up, wouldn't you rather have preserved or well taken care of neighborhoods as opposed to blight or places that are just torn down and left empty? Importantly, historic preservation is vital to our economy. Why? Because I mentioned before, 19 million of you come every year, and that is our #1 economic driver here in New Orleans. Unfortunately, we don't have tech or health industry like other big cities do, but we have tourism. Love it or hate it, this is what we got. And so, if New Orleans does not feel and look like New Orleans, people are gonna stop coming. So it is really important for us to keep our city authentic so that we continue to support the economy here of people visiting. It's also really important for those of us who live here, because this is a crazy place to live, y'all. We have hurricanes, we have all the things I've mentioned before. It can be stressful, but we live here because it's really great and unique and special. But it's got to stay that way for people to continue to live here. There's also a very direct economic corollary between preservation and the economy. In terms of historic tax credits, you get $8 return on every dollar spent in the state of Louisiana, which is an incredible return for the state. This is the World Trade Center building. So if you walk out on a canal street and look down towards the river, you will see this building. It's now Four Seasons Hotel. And a few years ago, it's designed by this guy, Edward Durrell-Stone. Some of you may have heard of him. But it's not the most beautiful building, okay, granted. It's not a New Orleans style building, okay, got it. But it's there, and it's massive. And so when you think about that and a landfill, that kind of makes you a little bit sick, probably. But a few years ago, there was a proposal to demolish the building and put up some sort of amusement park area. And the proposal was backed by the mayor of the city and some of the top business people in the city, and it seemed pretty bleak. But the preservationists of the city stepped up and said, that is ridiculous, love it or hate it, this building is here, and it can be something else. And so they forced an open bid process where different companies put their ideas out. And so the first one was for a W Hotel and condos, the second was for what you see today, it was just the Four Seasons. And the third, again, was to demolish the thing completely, and I don't even know what that is. What is that? I don't know. But that, again, that was the one that was supported by the mayor and the business people, and in this city, that seemed like a done deal. Like, we were all like, this building is toast. But amazingly, cooler heads prevailed, and the Four Seasons proposal won. And because that building was not demolished, there are millions of dollars that come to our city in tax revenue, jobs that are created, versus if they just put some sort of weird Ferris wheel or something there, like what a waste that would have been. So that is a perfect example of when saving a building is the most economically smart thing to do, the most environmental thing to do, and we're reaping the benefits of the city today from that decision. So finally, preservation makes communities stronger together because we are working together collectively to save the places that matter to all of us and lifting each other up in that process. And at the PRC, we do that every day. For years, we have used volunteer labor to fix up people's homes, mainly older people, low-income people who cannot afford to do the work themselves. We have a program called the Revival Grants Program where we give free home repairs to low-income homeowners in historic districts. We know that repairing historic homes is expensive, and that is a burden that some people cannot bear, and we want to help. And so this is the Armstrong sisters, they're triplets. They live in this beautiful home in Tremay with their children and grandchildren, and we were very excited to help them fix their home a few years ago. We help people across the city who live or own historic properties understand how to take care of them, because it's not intuitive. You can't go to Home Depot and just buy some stuff and stick it in your house here in New Orleans. It's harder than that. So we do a lot of work on educating homeowners, classes, that sort of thing. And this is the other work we do. We educate realtors, we educate the public, just anyone, from developers and people with lots of money to develop property, all the way down to just the owner who might not know how to take care of property. We advocate to save as many buildings as possible, and believe me, every week there are more buildings that people want to demolish in the city, so we're very busy. We save houses and landmarks. We have preservation easements on structures, which is a legal mechanism to say you can never tear this down. We hold 140 easements across the city. And communications is a huge part of what we do, which is exactly what I'm doing today. It's just helping you guys understand why it matters. Why does it matter if we save a building? Well, tonight or tomorrow or this weekend, when you go out and have a great meal or see live music, look at your surroundings. It's probably going to be in a cool historic building, and just think about, like, would this meal taste as good if this was in a strip mall? Or like, would this music sound as good if I was in a parking lot somewhere? The answer is no. It's part of the magic that all these things come together to create these experiences. So I hope you'll follow us on social media. We have really great feeds, especially on Instagram. A lot of this stuff is eye candy, but we really think it matters to get people interested, so that when the time comes when stuff is threatened, you're on the line. You're ready to speak up with us. So again, why should it matter to you? Well, probably half of the architecture firm billings go towards renovations. So you guys are going to be working on renovations probably. What is historic? Well, technically anything over 50 years old is historic, but it's up to you to use your discretion, Just because something isn't technically historic, should it still go into a landfill? Is that worth it? Is there still something worth saving? So this is going to be on y'all to decide in the future what is best for your communities. Okay, now I'm done. Go explore. Here's some ideas. Take a picture of the slide. Look at it later. Okay. Obviously, go walk around the French Quarter. You got to do that. Okay. Go to Napoleon House. Go get beignets at Cafe Du Monde. Go to Jackson Square. You got to do all that stuff. Okay. Go to Frenchmen Street. Listen to jazz. You can walk there if you're, willing. There's blue bikes around the city. You can rent a bike. The city is very flat, so biking around the city is a piece of cake. It is kind of chilly out there. That's the only bad thing. But you can bike through the Treme and Marigny Bywater. You'll see gorgeous architectures. Those are beautiful, very special neighborhoods. You can bike up Esplanade Avenue. Yeah, it's pronounced Esplanade. I know. That's just a thing here. But bike up there to City Park. City Park is absolutely gorgeous. And you can take the St. Charles Avenue streetcar, like I mentioned earlier, go look at mansions and enjoy the neighborhoods. You can get off at Audubon Park. It's spectacular. Go see Tulane University and Loyola. You can stop at Washington Avenue, go tour the Garden District. Walk around the Garden District, get a coffee. It's really worth it. It's wonderful. The Lower Garden District, super hip, really beautiful, lots of great restaurants and shops. And Magazine Street is 6 straight miles of local shops, restaurants, bars. It's fabulous. It is world renowned. So try and make your way to Magazine Street, further uptown, not here downtown. Make your way up to Magazine Street, further uptown. You'll really, really enjoy it. Thank you.